We got one more guest and one more segment for this Thursday edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is with professional handicapper Tony George from Doc Sports. Tony, how's it going today, man?
Oh, boy, just stuffing the stockings with cash, buddy. Just fired up for some more bowl releases today, and on a nice little 41-17 overall hoops run right now in college and pro hoops. So I'm kind of dialed in and in sync in basketball and making up for kind of a not-so-good football season. I tell it like it is, coming off a 160-unit game baseball season. So kind of sandwiched in a not-so-good football season, finishing strong here in the bowls of the NFL, but nonetheless excited about basketball and, of course, some upcoming bowl games and some crazy times in the NFL. So I'm kind of yanking my hair out and excited at the same time, Adam.
I got to ask, Tony, I mean, you know, we talk about this all the time. You've been in the business for a long time. Obviously, if you're in this, doing it seriously, you have a lot of ups and downs over the course of your career. And as long as you have more ups than downs, it's a very good thing. Is it just a variance thing for you in football this year, or is it, you know, maybe a tightening of the market that you didn't account for?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. You know, I grew up in this business in the early to mid to late 90s, you know, when I was just kind of a young lad. And there was a gentleman out here, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with this name, Mike Lee, who was a mentor of mine, and he wrote a lot of books on handicapping, especially baseball. And I still use a lot of those techniques in baseball that you know, he mentored me on. Mike passed away in 2006, unfortunately. But along the way, you have to learn to adapt a little bit, take different things into consideration. And maybe here the last couple of years, I've been a little slow to adapt to those things. Hey, if you play good defense and run the football in the NFL and your quarterback's serviceable, you know, that's enough. You know, playoff season, you just try and pick the straight-up winner, who you think's going to do, and whatever the line is with them, you take them. And some of these older philosophies, you know, you can throw them out the window now. So there's been a little bit of things I need to adapt to. But, you know, for the last year and this year were not great football seasons for me, and yet the 3 previous years before that, I was ranked number 1 or number 2 in the NFL at a respected monitor for the season, you know, and so I've had a couple of down years. I'm very transparent. Anybody that goes to my YouTube page over there, Doc Sports and Tony George, just search it. I give daily updates, and unlike, you know, like 90% of the handicappers out there, I actually tell it like it is. And I know the guys you have on your show, and Brad Powers, who I have a lot of respect for. These guys tell it like it is, but there's a lot who don't. But it's just been one of those years, you know, and I've had 26 years in this business. You just don't last that long, you know, by blowing smoke up people's ass. You know, you get, you know, and saying, oh, I'm 9-1 on Monday Night Football, when clearly you're 1-9 or you're 5-4, and you know, and with the information age the way it is now, you have to tell it the way it is because they're going to call you out if you don't. So I think being transparent is good, and I need to change some philosophy a little bit, handicapping football going into next year. Bowl games kind of remain the same, you know, in terms of how I'm approaching them. I've been highly successful with them this year as well. So we'll see how it goes. We'll finish out strong, and we'll stay dialed in hoops.
Well, and I think it's one of those things, too. And, I mean, you know, I'm not selling selections or moving around the kind of money that you are, but, you know, what I do for Bang the Book, it is a year-round handicapping process covering all of the sports. And, you know, sometimes you're going to excel at one sport, maybe be down a little bit at others. And, you know, it's tough because you're constantly trying to make these adjustments. And if you do it across, you know, basically 5 or 6 sports like you're doing it with your clients, there's a lot going on there. You know, some personal handicappers can just key in on one sport where they feel like they're very good. But when you've got clients that want information, want plays, you're doing every sport. Even if you don't feel like your edge is as strong as it is, you know, in past years or as strong as it could. It's a tough thing to be really good across the board.
It is tough, and it's even tougher to meet expectations. You know, like, I'm also like on an insane run in the NBA. I think I'm 23-9. Okay, so now, and we have I have a substantial move tonight in the Heat and Rockets game, and so they're going to have a lot of guys jump on board, and I know that if I bump up the units on a play, and guys are coming in, this guy's hotter than hell, and he's, hit 29, he's hit 23 out of 32, and he, this, that, and the other. He swept Wednesday nights. So I'm going to jump on board. Whether you have that one guy that jumps on board for that big play and wasn't on board for the whole season, where you're up 58 units year to date, and you lose that guy, that one play, you lose that play, well, you're only as good as your last pick, and you're a loser, the lowest common denominator of human filth, which is why, for the most part, even when I'm on a solid roll, I won't throw out, a big play very often. I flat bet across the board. I tell them, and so you have all these customer expectations that you're managing, in a site like Doc Sports that has a lot of clients. You're responsible for $100,000 or more in wagers on any given evening where people are going off of your advice, and it's very difficult sometimes to maintain, I think, any level of sanity if things start going south on you. It really weighs heavy. A lot of guys don't give a rat's ass. They just put up, a game of the year the next day. I don't operate like that. So I keep it low volume. I talk about it on your show all the time. Less is more. Slow and steady wins the race. That way you don't get too high or you don't get too low. I'm a low volume guy, which allows me to find the best number on the board and bet into that number. Not a game, but bet into a number that I feel has a better than average chance of winning and maintain some sort of consistency. That's the key in wagering, is just maintaining consistency and managing your bankroll. So instead of selling picks, I'm kind of selling that whole package, and people understand my philosophy, and they also understand as easily as I can go 9-1, I can go 1-9, and I know what the hell I'm doing, Adam. So it is a double-edged sword, and it's definitely anybody that's listening that wants to get into this business. I would advise probably not to get into it. One football season will put 5 years on your face real quick in terms of stress and sleep deprivation and worrying and scratching your head. And you sometimes, when you're in those losing streaks, you can't see the forest because of all the trees. And so what I've learned over 26 years, how to adapt and how to, snap out of it. And, I have friends in the business like you have friends in the business. I can call them up and talk to them about, this, that, or the other. And, I have a couple of really good friends out here in the handicapping business, and they've talked me off the ledge more than one time, and I've done the same to them.
All right, let's touch on this Sunday night football game here. Kansas City and Seattle. Kansas City, 2.5-point favorite going up to the Pacific Northwest. Seattle, a home underdog for the second time this season, third time in the last 2 years. Prior to that, they weren't a home dog since 2012. So, what do you think about this one here on Sunday Night Football? Patty Mahomes and company heading up to a very tough atmosphere.
Well, I'll tell you what. The one thing about, and everybody knows I lived in Kansas City 12 years, unless you're living under a rock or don't listen to the show very often, but I've been a Chiefs fan my whole life and obviously excited about this year's edition of the Kansas City Chiefs, but you have to ask yourself this question. Kansas City has had 3 tests this year, and they failed every one of them. They had a test against Tom Brady on the road. They failed, albeit it was 3 points, but they failed. They had a test against the Rams on the road this year. Hell of a game, 50-something to 50-something, 1-point loss, but it's a loss. You had a test last week against San Diego, and you lost. And so the 3 best teams you played this year, you're 0-3. No matter how good Patrick Mahomes is, losing Kareem Hunt, one of the best all-around backs in the league, having a defense that is a funnel to the end zone, and something that you need to discuss at this point in time of the year, late December, early January. This is no breaking news to you, Adam. You have Andy Reid as a head coach in big games and in the postseason, and he's laid an egg everywhere he's been, Kansas City and Philly. Here's another big game. Seattle took the day off last week. They got beat. Kansas City, grabbed a defeat from the jaws of victory, albeit I'll give Mahomes this much. He did lose against two future Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady. That being said, I don't know the outcome of the side play in this game, but I can only look at the over 53. I think Kansas City has an offense that nobody can stop. I don't. You might be able to contain them to 27. They played a couple good defenses this year in Baltimore and Denver, and all those games they hovered around 24 to 27 points, well under their season average. I don't think that Seattle has those type of defenses. I don't think Kansas City is going to be intimidated by playing out on the West Coast in a very tough stadium. They're used to loud stadiums because they have the loudest stadium in the league, followed by Seattle. But at the end of the day, Kansas City's not going to be able to stop Russell Wilson. Seattle, with his ability not only to run the football, which Kansas City can't stop Grandma Costco pushing a shopping cart on defense, they're going to be able to run the ball successfully against Kansas City. Russell Wilson's going to move the chains on third down, and they're going to put points up. And I think Kansas City can easily counter those points, and I like the over in this game. The side play to me is too close to call. It wouldn't shock me if Seattle beat them in a 3-point ball game one way or the other, and it wouldn't shock me if Kansas City beat them by 3 points. I think the side play, I don't see a lot of value in the number, but I do see that total being suspect at at 50, 53, 53 and a half, whatever it is right now, because my computer is down today, Adam. My internet's out, so I'm doing this all by the fly. But I think Kansas City and Seattle have a night. I think it'll be a great football game to watch, and I think there'll be a lot of scoring.
Yeah, you're right. The total is 53 for this one. And something that's interesting, it is fascinating, that Baltimore game against the Chargers on Saturday night, how much that impacts everything else going on Sunday. It has a direct impact on the Indianapolis game, has a direct impact on the Pittsburgh-New Orleans game, and also on this Kansas City-Seattle game. If the Chargers find a way to lose to Baltimore, Kansas City's in a situation where if they give a max effort on Sunday night and win, nobody has to play next week against Oakland because they'll have the division wrapped up. So, it's one of those things where that game on Saturday night just means so much. And if you can get, Travis Kelce a week off, Tyreek Hill a week off, Pat Mahomes a week off, maybe they treat it like a preseason game, like the first preseason game, play a series and then get the hell out of Dodge against Oakland. That may be a motivating factor for the Chiefs. So a lot going on here in Week 16, but I agree with you that, for Kansas City this year, they did beat the Chargers in the first game they played them. They also got badly outgained in that game.
Yeah, they did, and I think we talked about that last week on your show, and I brought that up. Kansas City thoroughly got outplayed against San Diego in the first game of the season. The problem was Phillip Rivers had 3, and I mean 3 touchdown passes where it hit the receivers in the hands where nobody was even the closest Kansas City defender was 5 yards away, including Antonio Gates in that game. Keenan Allen and one other receiver dropped 3 wide-open touchdown passes, or it would have been a completely different outcome. And I'm not discounting Kansas City's prowess. They have gotten better as the year goes along. They have an equal quarterback in this game. They have a better, I think, overall receiving core. Now they got Kelvin Benjamin in there. I think they have a serviceable running game. Kelsey's, going to be a future Hall of Famer. He's a great player. Kansas City and Tyreek Hill is basically their answer to Lockett. There's a lot of interesting matchups in this game, but Kansas City is a team with a lot of talent. I'm telling you, you cannot, and I tell my Kansas City brethren all the time, my Facebook and stuff, but they're all fanatical Chiefs fans. I say, you need to manage your expectations because you are not. I think the last team that had a mediocre defense and just a killer offense was the St. Louis Rams. And they were able to win the Super Bowl with Kurt Warner and not playing much defense and just outscoring people. It's just not the league right now where you can start to outscore people. And that being said, right now, you said there's so much going on. Adam, there's a lot of teams that are losing their identity and some that are gaining them, as in the Saints. Their offense, regardless of – I know they're playing Pittsburgh this weekend. They're back in the Dome, but their offense has sputtered severely over the past 3 weeks. So was the Bears, but then their defense has stepped way up. Kansas City's offense has sputtered a little bit, and they've missed a few beats because Kareem Hunt is gone. Kareem Hunt was a hell of a ball player, a difference maker. And it's hard. And then you had Spencer Ware go down, with a little bit of it. He's not 100%. So then you take that out of the mix. And Hill wasn't 100% last week with a bad foot, against San Diego. And he didn't make a lot of huge plays. So, there's just a lot of teams out there you're trying to figure out. Baltimore still doesn't have an identity. Now they got Lamar Jackson, a quarterback. What are they going to bring to the table? There's just a lot of things going on where, there's a lot of topsy-turvy things. The best thing I can tell you about the NFL this Sunday, it's going to be wild, it's going to be wacky, and it's going to be very unpredictable, especially late in the second half of some of these games. You want to really tread lightly this Sunday and Saturday.
All right, so let's transition over to the college basketball side of things here for a couple of minutes. And Texas Tech, undefeated team, elite defense. Ken Pomeroy has them with the number 1 defense in the country. Bart Torvik has them with the number 4 defense in the country. They meet Duke tonight at Madison Square Garden. It's been nothing but Duke money here this morning. Duke up from 7 to a 10-point favorite. I know you're a Big 12 guy, Tony. What do you think about Texas Tech and their chances tonight at MSG?
Well, I've got a totals play in this game, and I have my charts pulled up, but Cox Cable decided to do maintenance on the internet today, so I don't have my numbers in front of you. But, I guess the question is, can the Red Raiders slow down this offense? And my answer to that is probably no. Can they slow it down enough to get the cover now that it's been steamed up to 10? You're probably going to see 11 and a half. If it gets up around that number, it's probably worth the stretch to take Texas Tech. But one thing I want you to remember about Texas Tech, and I did write down this note because I was doing my handicapping for the total in this game. Their schedule, 350th in the country, strength of schedule. And of course, Duke was inside the top 100 with their schedule, and they're taking on all comers, and it's, to me, I just think Duke's got too much for them. I really do. I guess I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to come up with enough offensive, enough offense or enough stops on defense to keep it close. This is the type of game that Mike Krzyzewski lives for. And they've had a couple of tests on national TV this year. One of them was a loss against Gonzaga at the Maui Classic. But at days in here, I think this is going to be a big step up in class for Texas Tech. And I guess their only signature win this year, Texas Tech, was beating Nebraska at the Sprint Center in Kansas City. And, obviously Nebraska's a very good basketball team this year, but that was a game where Nebraska shot, around 30% from the floor and just couldn't get out of their own way. I don't know what they just didn't show up that day. But, if I had to take a side that gets much over 10, I'd probably lean Tech in this one. But I think Duke's the best team in the country. And I think when they get their bigger guy healthy, they're going to be almost unbeatable. Madison Square Garden, Duke's used to the big stage, even though they have a young team. Krzyzewski knows how to coach them, on a big stage like that, on a national TV game. Texas Tech not so familiar with that down in Lubbock Stadium, half full. I could lean Duke here, but if it gets any higher than 10, it's either stay away or you got to take the points. But I think would it surprise you, Adam, if Duke won by 23 tonight?
It would, and that's one of those things. I think it speaks to the last point that you made there that, Duke is used to this spotlight. And I know Texas Tech made a big run in the NCAA tournament last year, but this is Duke's element. I mean, yeah, the Cameron Crazies aren't there, but this is still Duke's element. I mean, they're very accustomed to these big spotlight types of games. And for Texas Tech, as you mentioned, and this is as big of a step up in class as you can possibly get with the schedule that they've played. So I think it's really – go ahead.
The other thing I was just going to say is it's been since November 21st since Duke has scored less than 84 points. And that 84 points they scored was against Gonzaga. I'm just saying, if you take a look at Texas Tech's schedule, I apologize for my internet being down because I had this all queued up for you. But if you take a look at Texas Tech's schedule, it's just the only team they played of any substance was Nebraska, and albeit they beat them. I think they beat them 72 to 58 or something like that. It was Nebraska did not have a good day from the floor. But at the end of the day, so I'll give Texas Tech that. They played a top 25 team, and they beat them convincingly. Everybody else they played is a putz. This is a huge step up in class. And, the question I asked you, Adam, is the question I ask myself at games like this. And I pretty much avoid games like this. I'll look at totals. I won't look at sides in marquee games very often because obviously this is going to be a pros versus Joe if it gets over 10. The pros are all going to take the points to Texas Tech. The public will continue to pound Duke. But at the end of the day, I ask myself the same question I asked you. Can Duke probably beat these guys by 20? Yeah, they can. If I can't answer that question with a positive yes, then I'll consider the underdog a lot more. But literally, Duke could win this game, by 20, 23 points. They really could. And especially if Texas Tech gets the one thing about a game like this, Adam, you've seen this when we talk about the big stage. If Duke gets out to a 20-5 lead out of the gate, then you get the deer in the headlights routine with a team that's not used to that stage against a team that's used to that stage and against a team and a coach that knows how to close on that stage. And that's where it gets away from you in the second half. If you think Duke's going to come out against them and show them up, I haven't seen the halftime line, but there's probably half of that. I don't know what Duke's laying in the first half. Probably behoove you, to maybe play a first half line in this if it's manageable.
All right, so I know that you're working a little bit shorthanded with the internet being out over there, but I did want to touch quickly on the Kansas and Arizona State game coming up on Saturday. Kansas undefeated, 10-0, but this is their first true road game with this trip out to Tempe. Have you seen a Jayhawks team that, can go into a little bit different of an atmosphere and come away with a cover and a victory?
Yeah, again, I was doing some work this morning. I got your email early this morning, my time, and started doing some work on this before I got shut down here. But the one thing that I looked at here, I'm expecting Kansas to be around. I got a power rating difference and on three different levels here of about Kansas. I've got a power rating on Kansas is 8 points higher than what Arizona State is, and I was a little disappointed to see Arizona State go down to Vandy, who I took them -1.5, and they got their butt whipped, and Vandy's not that good. They also lost to Nevada, a team of Kansas's caliber, by 6, and that was back on the 7th, or first week of this month. I'm going to say the 7th. And Hurley, he's done a nice job with them, but I just think Kansas is going to have a little bit too. You can get Kansas 6 or under in this game. Sometimes Kansas plays a little better away from home than they do at home. They take too much for granted at home. Albeit Villanova gave them a hell of a game, and Kansas has not looked good. New Mexico State gave them a game on a neutral floor that was in Kansas City, basically a home game. Kansas has not shown that eye of the tiger and that prowess to put teams away. But I watched that Arizona State and Vandy game, and Arizona State's got some holes on that team. And Arizona State lacks a lot of consistency on the defensive side of the ball. They don't do well in transition defense, and that's one thing that Kansas will do because they basically have an all-guard type driven team. They got 3 stud guards on the floor anytime. They run the ball well in transition, and Arizona State has a little trouble handling that. I could only lean – if that number is 6 or under, I'm hoping to catch 4.5, 5 with KU. Probably worth a stretch on Kansas.
All right, I want to touch on the NBA here then, as we've got the holiday break coming up, and in the NBA it's only one day, just Christmas Eve off and then a bunch of Christmas Day games. We'll talk about that in a second, but do you do anything differently with your handicapping because there's the distraction of the holidays coming up for these players?
I'll add an extra point to the home court team. That's it. Not really. Not really. They're organized enough to get their Christmas in out of the way with their families back in their hometowns early, where they're living. I'm not one to give too much special consideration in the NBA. They're used to being on the road. They play 40-some games on the road every year. A lot of people put a lot of emphasis on it. I don't. You're getting to the point now in the NBA where you can pretty much rely on your last 5-game stats and get your overlays right. That's one thing we do in the NBA that I do, and I've been successful on. NBA is one of my strongest sports. Teams are starting to have a lot of identifiers and comprehensive stats that their efficiency ratings, this, that, and the other. You always have to take injuries into account and things like that. But, at the end of the day, these will be national TV games. Nobody's going to rest anybody on these big Christmas Day games. They're all going to play. And being on national television, especially with some of these Christmas Day games, both teams will bring it. They know it's very rare, at any point in time in the NBA, except the playoffs, that they have national primetime games that aren't on, TNT. ESPN will have a Wednesday night game, but it's rare. It's not like the NFL and college football where every time you turn on the TV and there's one of those games on here, and you can expect both teams to bring it and stay true to their stats. But I will give, some home courts I'll give 1 or 2 or 3 points. Very rarely 3. There's 3 or 4 teams I'll give a 3-point home court to, but I'll add an extra point to the home team, whether they're a favorite or a dog on Christmas Day, but that's about it. It's not a huge adjustment.
Well, when you look at Christmas Day here, over the last 5 years, the home team is 13-12 straight up and against the spread, so no real value there. The under is 14-9-2 on the under on Christmas Day over the last 5 years, 23-15-2 going back to the 2010 season. So maybe the under a little bit of an angle, but the sides pretty much straight up across the board, 13-12, both straight up and against the spread. So, Tony George, professional handicapper over at Doc Sports. What do you got going on over there right now, Tony?
Well, we're on a big roll, and, anybody that joins our site gets free $60 if they're a new member. And so if you want to take advantage of that, you have access to our daily spreadsheets and what we did the night before, what we played, what the score was, how many units we had on it. It's 100% transparent. Everybody's got a smartphone nowadays, You can just text the word Tony to 29022. That's Tony to 29022. You'll get a link on your phone, on your smartphone. Just tap on that, put in your name and email address, and you've got an account with $60 in it. No strings. You don't need a credit card, and you can give us a try. And even that money that we give you for free, you can use to purchase play packages. Once you purchase them, even though it's free money, those are backed by 100% pure profit guarantee. It's a win-win. It's a nice stocking stuffer. Just text the word Tony to 29022 and get hooked up. 41-17 run in basketball right now, Adam, and 18-8 run in college hoops. I'm excited about that. 9-0 the last 2 Saturdays, a 4-0 and a 5-0 back-to-back Saturday weekends, and really dialed in and really looking forward to getting to conference action in college basketball. But out of the gate, we're doing very well.
Tony George, who's working and fine over at Doc Sports, at TGeorgeSports on Twitter. Tony, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and yours, bud, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, I want to wish everybody here. I get a lot of guys come over. I want to give you some props, Adam, and I read some of your stuff over at BangTheBook.com, too. You do a great job over there and I really put a lot of emphasis on your insight there. Some good stuff there, but nonetheless, I get a lot of guys on my YouTube page leaving channels saying they came over and heard me on the Bang the Book podcast there. And so I want to tell all your listeners out there, especially the ones that came over to YouTube and followed my daily free play videos and updates, thanks a lot for subscribing and following me over there. And I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.